Hey man, how's it going? I hope you've been well since our last little conversation. I thought I would give you a bit of an update because I was just making some notes on a short video that I was watching from Sam Harris. It's literally only 10 minutes long or so, which is why it's just like the one page. But the point being, I thought it might be a useful example to show, okay, here's how I think about making notes. Here's the kind of notes that I make. And also how I might think about combining some different ideas. Right now, I'm working on a book project, so I won't have time to turn this into an essay, but this is like a partly baked essay in my mind, and it's kind of forming. I still don't know exactly where I'll take it or where I'll go, but I write the notes in a way that helps me to have the right thoughts. So that's kind of the idea. So the point being, so it was like a really short video. I think it just came out. It was Sam Harris on the big thing. It's like 10 minutes long. And so line by line, I'm kind of, as he's making a point, I will just write down the core thesis of that point. And then like here, he's making some bifurcations. He's saying, oh, you know, we have a choice between this and this, this and this, this and this. And so I'm making notes on all that. So the video overall, the kind of point he was making is that he started off with, you know, there's a crisis of meaning in the developed world. Culture has become fractured. And this idea, and he paints it repetitively through some of these different clauses, is that we have this choice. And he frames three choices later on. So there's a zero-sum contest between open society, closed society. We have the perpetual choice between conversation and violence, between persuasion and coercion. And so, you know, he starts off with that. He leads on to making this point about how, I think the early point is essentially that technology and the way that we use it has changed a lot about the way society interacts. And I'm embellishing slightly here, but I'm connecting it to other ideas that I've had, right? So society has grown a tremendous amount in a relatively short space of time. You can think about the way in which you can almost carbon date some types of media by how many people they think there are in the world. So there are often books where they might say, oh, there were 6 billion people in the world. You automatically know this book is from the early 2000s, right? Because things have changed since then, right? So if they think there's 6 billion people in the world, I know what period of time that book comes from. If they think there's 7 billion people in the world, this is like early 2000s period. If they think there are, you know, 8 billion people in the world, I know that we're getting towards the 2010s or whatever. So you can think about things in that way. But the point being that the advent of social media has created, and I wrote an essay about this, which is about mini-metaverses, this idea that, and Sam Harris makes this point, we don't really know what other people are seeing. And my idea of the mini-metaverse thing is that, you know, there was a period of time where everyone was thinking about, oh, what the metaverse is going to be like, and there's going to be one metaverse and we're all going to be there. And I was like, actually, I mean, we already exist in millions of mini-metaverses where we already have individuated experiences of the world. All the algorithms that surround you, social media, even your search history, what you get on your browser when you're looking for information. All of these things are little algorithms that are tailored to the way that you interact with them. And so the way that you search influences the way that you're going to search later on. The things that you watch influences the things that you will watch later on. More and more, you get pulled in a particular direction based on your past behavior. So even if you change and evolve as a person, it is hard to reconstruct all the algorithms that your life centers around, right? Your Instagram algorithm, your YouTube algorithm, your TikTok algorithm, your Twitter algorithm, all these algorithms that you interface with on a day-to-day life, even your search algorithm, they become tailored to your particular preferences at one point in time. They don't always very easily change with you or afford you the opportunity to change by showing you a wider variety of other examples. And what happens, and this was my mini-metaverse idea, and I'm going into this, but I'll come out of it in a second, but the idea was this point that within that mini metaverse, your baselines shift. Your idea of what normal is shifts because everyone else that you see and interact with are other people that also interface with that same mini metaverse. So if you are in the manosphere, or you are, you know, like a red pilled person or whatever that is, or you are a woman and a lot of the content that you see is also of people that might get, let's say, like permanent cosmetic procedures, that becomes normal to you. It becomes normal to you because everywhere you look, you will see other people that have had that thing. who have accepted that as normal. And you don't get to see all the other possible multiverses of people where that is completely foreign. And so the more time you spend in a particular space online, the more that influences your sense of normal. So how I would tie this into what Sam Harris is talking about is this idea that similarly, we have a political bifurcation where people enabled by the technology that we use have kind of tunneled in or borrowed in, and not always intentionally. It's simply the way that we interface with technology that can shift us in certain directions where mainstream media, celebrities, all of the Democrats had a very certain idea that this is going to be a slam dunk election. This person at Donald Trump's rally made this joke. That's it. It's over. Of course, Kamala Harris is going to win. You know, it's very easy to get stuck in a mini metaverse where everything you believe makes sense. Everything that all the people around you say also makes sense. And you construct a certain belief of the world on that basis, which ends up being drastically different from the actual reality because you don't really get to see all those other people. So anyway, that's kind of where he starts. Then he comes down into this idea, like I said, of this bifurcation, open society, closed society, persuasion, coercion, conversation, violence. There's a point that he makes that conversation is the only bulwark against violence, because if you don't have conversation, if you don't have, and there was in the subtext of what he was saying, there's this idea that the connective tissue of conversation, the thing that enables conversation, is a shared understanding. If you don't have a way to share understanding, then you can't have good conversations. And if you can't have good conversations, then naturally society will trend towards closed societies, towards violence, towards conflict, towards war, because you don't have any shared basis on which you're able to communicate. And that connects to the first point, because the point is, the more that we end up in these mini metaverses, the more we end up in these individuated experiences of our online digital lives, the less we understand other people and the more conflicts that we get as a natural result. So those two things piece together quite well. Then there's a third piece where he's then talking about meditation. And my notes here again are paraphrased because I'm not always writing word for word what he's saying. I'm writing what he says makes me think. So what I was writing was this idea that meditation mediates our experience of the world, and the way that we think mediates our experience of the world. And so actually, you know, if you were to think of this as a filter funnel, you might have at the very primary layer, there's this idea, and I think I've written about it somewhere, but I don't remember the name of the essay, but there's this idea that actually, I mean, you could go to neuroscience for this. Your experience of the world, the things that you see, all of your senses are not the world itself, right? Life is it's a mediated experience, right? Your brain is locked in a dark box. It has no idea what's going on in the outside world. It's getting everything it understands based on data, your sensory data. So the sensation from your hands, from your eyes, from your nose, from your mouth, everything, all of these things work together to give your brain some kind of simulation of what is happening in the outside world. But that simulation can be distorted in a variety of ways. At the very primary level, you know, for example, this is how waterboarding works, right? You don't have wet sensors. You can't you can't sense wetness. What you sense is pressure and temperature, and your brain combines those things to create the sensation and imagine what wetness feels like. So when you feel water and it feels wet, what you're feeling is the pressure, the pressure along the different points in your skin and the temperature of the water, and that's how you can simulate an experience and get someone to believe something is happening to them, like being waterboarded, feeling like you're drowning when it's not actually happening, because your brain actually doesn't really have an idea. It's just figuring things out based on this data. So that's one point. If you take a step before that, you actually also realize, and I'm slightly drifting here, but we'll get back to the point. You'll also realize that your brain does not wait until the sensory data arrives before taking action. It predicts what sensory data is going to come and uses the incoming data to update its predictions. And that's then when you act. So let's say you're walking in a path and a rock dislodges and falls on you and you jump out of the way. What did not happen, or what most people would assume happens, is, oh, you were walking and you saw the rock falling and you had super fast instincts to jump out of the way. If that was the case, you'd be dead. Everyone would be dead. The brain doesn't work like that. The brain is pattern matching everything that you've ever learned since your birth. As you are walking, it is already predicting the likelihood that a rock might be dislodged and fall on you. And so in predicting that, it is preparing the neurons in advance to fire in the event that it gets sensory data that confirms that prediction. So you start walking, then you get the very first sensations of sensory data that something might be happening there. Your brain has already predicted it. It's already prepared the neurons to fire. As soon as that sensory data arrives that confirms that prediction, your neurons are already primed. Boom, you can react very quickly and you survive. And all of this is geared towards survival. So why do I mention all of this? The point is that our sensation of the world mediates our perception of the world. But then in your perception of the world itself, that also mediates your experience of the world. There's this idea, and Sam Harris has talked about this before. I think I've written about this a little bit before. There's this idea that your experience of the world doesn't have to be, or the way that the things that happen don't have to correlate with your experience of them happening. I think there's a very common example of this where people say something like, events are neutral and things happen in the world, and that doesn't mean that, oh, for you it might be good, for someone else it might be bad. I think I've actually talked about this in an essay that I wrote about luck, and this idea that luck is kind of fractal in a way where, and I think I talked about like, oh, chess is luck, everything is luck. And what defines whether something's lucky or not is really your proximity to the event. And when you have a very far proximity to the event, you're more likely to say something is lucky because you don't kind of count all the intermediary events that happen between you and the event. So if you're walking down the street and you find some money on the floor, you say, wow, I was lucky. Obviously someone else was unlucky, but that seems like luck. It doesn't seem like skill. But let's say you're in a sporting event or you're in a chess game, you have much more closer proximity to someone making a mistake that you can capitalize on. Technically still luck, that the same mechanisms are involved. Someone else takes an action that's fortuitous for you and negative for them, and you can capitalize on it. That seems more like skill because you have more proximity to it and you can act on it more directly, even though it's luck in the same sense. It's all just fractal, depending on your closeness to it. Anyway, all of that to say, it's just this idea that, okay, if you meditate, if you see something that makes you angry, you don't just have to react in anger, right? That might be the natural reaction or response, but you can mediate that. You can put something, which is your own thought and the qualia of you moving through the world. You can use that to mediate the external activities in the world and your internal experience of what those things mean and how those things should affect you. And so there's this idea that like anger can have a half-life. You don't have to live out the full experience of anger. Something could happen that would normally trigger the experience of anger in you, and you can mediate it very quickly and decide, actually, I don't want to live that experience. This thing has happened, but it's already happened. It's done. I don't want to keep responding to this external stimuli in the same way. So anyway, that's a point. Then another point, and I kind of went off on a tangent here, but it connects. So he mentions this idea, yes, that all human progress and future states kind of come from knowledge. And he kind of presented, and I'm paraphrasing, but this dichotomy between dogma and knowledge. What that connected to in my mind is I recently watched, I think it was an interview with Barry Weiss and Peter Thiel, very recently. I think it also came out this week. And in that, Peter Thiel mentioned this idea that science really comes from this balance between skepticism and dogma. And historically, there are a lot of things that might have been driven by dogma, and there are a lot of things that are driven by skepticism. And science is kind of a barrier in the middle where we find some kind of golden mean between the two. You don't want to be too dogmatic. You don't want to be too skeptical and veer off into conspiracy. But then it just made me think, I mean, is dogma useful? And actually, of course, we've had so much progress scientifically from science, right? From this period of time that might be in some people's minds unique to the West. But I think even now there's an interesting balance where we see, is democracy working, right? Particularly liberal democracy, right? Francis Fukuyama had the end of history. That's clearly not worked. It didn't turn out that way. And I think Peter Thiel also talks about this idea that when democracy goes right, we say it's democracy. When it goes wrong, we say it's populism. Like if I don't like it, it's populism. If it goes right, then it's democracy. And it's this idea that Garrett Jones also talks about this. He has a great book about the elites and the masses, and this idea that do the masses really know what they're doing? And the extent to which sometimes we actually want elites to make decisions on our behalf so we don't have to think through things for ourselves. And we can clearly see plenty of occasions where people trying to think through things from themselves make the wrong decision. They come to the wrong conclusion. We get bad presidents. We get bad democracies. And so it's this idea that just following the wisdom of the crowds doesn't lead you to the right place. So this is now where I'm slightly departing from, my original, like what Sam Harris is saying. I'm thinking for myself here, and I'm like, I want to explore this a bit more, where there's a balance here between autocracy and democracy. And funnily enough, there are some circumstances where autocracy ends up getting things right that democracy gets wrong. And by giving everyone an equal say, you can go down the wrong path, but by putting a small number of people in the right place, you can end up going further to the right path. And actually, when I was thinking about the Peter Thiel thing, I didn't make detailed notes on that, but even at the time, I was just thinking about this idea that, is it really true? When you think about the emergence of science in a much more coherent way, a much more structured way in society, there was a sense in which it's almost like, what's the difference between that and Muhammad, or, the preacher comes down from the mountaintop with a fresh revelation that he gives to the rest of the people, right? The people, the common man is not doing the science. The scientists are doing the science, and they come every few years to give us their revelations. How many people in the regular world know if or why Pluto is a planet? We don't know. People don't have any idea. They don't even know why. They just accept that, okay, the new science has come. The new revelations have come from the sky. They've been given to us, and this is now our new belief system. It's not any less dogmatic. Just because we call it science, the experience, again, this is a level of proximity here. Your proximity to science and what it is and how it works determines the extent to which this is something worth being skeptical about, or if this is dogma. For the vast majority of people, science is dogma. And it's dogma because it's something that you're taught. It's something that you accept. You are told, here are some facts. Here are some studies. You don't read the studies. They just tell you, studies have been done. This is the result. You don't even read the study. You don't read the paper. You read a newspaper headline. The newspaper headline ends up being wrong. And suddenly you're all off in this completely different universe where you believe facts that are no longer true. This happens all the time with books, where a book comes out in the 90s or in the 80s. It becomes incredibly popular. There's some things in Thinking Fast and Slow, which is widely praised, that we now know are wrong. Some of the science, right? In loads of other books, there's science that we realize, oh, that was good science at the time, is bad science now because we know better. And so actually, if you run off with those ideas, you're now wrong. You may not have been wrong in 1988, but you're wrong now because we know better. And so, yeah, like, how do you mesh all these ideas? The extent to which your belief system should be individuated versus collective, the extent to which finding a balance where people can get along and have mutual understanding comes from each person having their own balance of being skeptical versus dogmatic, and the extent to which actually what you need are elites that you can trust, that mediate your experience of reality, right? It is I haven't fully thought all of this through, but it's an interesting idea to start with and to start thinking deeper about the areas in which this is true versus not true, the area in which we already accept this, even if we think that we don't, even if it doesn't seem appealing to believe that this is true, and the extent to which this already exists. I'm just trying to think if I have anything else here, but I think that's essentially it. So yeah, I mean, those are my notes, and kind of you can see where my thought processes have led me, and it's something I'm still thinking about, but it was like a short 10-minute video. I combined that with some thoughts from a 2-hour podcast that I listened to yesterday. I combined that with an essay that I wrote last year or 2 years ago, and so now I have this completely different idea, this completely different train of thought, which is original to me, in the sense that it's not 100% original. It's coming from these various sources, but each one of them is a reflection of the way that I have interacted with that source to kind of come to a new conclusion. And the more I think about these things and the more I ruminate on them, the more maybe I can write something that people find useful. And yeah, so hopefully that's useful. Forgive me for rambling, but